Since ancient times, dark forces have existed in this world. They embodied humanity's darkness and fear, but somewhere in this very world, there are also individuals capable of fighting them. These people are known as psychics, or mediums. This right here is Reigen Arataka, who also pretends to be one of them, but in reality, he's just all talk and no action because he possesses absolutely no powers whatsoever. All of his little tricks are solely designed to swindle money from his unsuspecting clients. When he's about to perform an exorcism session, a malevolent spirit suddenly appears right in front of this fake psychic, whose ultimate technique is to violently throw salt. But seriously now, does it even look like the ghost is actually scared? At this point, Reigen finds himself compelled to employ his ultimate technique, calling for assistance from his apprentice. Not even 5 seconds pass, and Shigeo Kageyama, also widely known as Mobi, immediately appears and obliterates the ghost with a single, swift movement. He is a genuine psychic. Even though he's barely in middle school, he has the unfortunate luck of being Reigen's disciple, a completely fake psychic. After pocketing the client's money, Reigen pays the boy less than 1% of what he actually received. On top of that, he told Mob that he'd split the work 50-50 just because he was fond of him. He assured him that that particular spirit was very weak, and that he himself exorcised the strong ones. Observing how the boy always seemed to be daydreaming, it wasn't at all surprising that he was so easily deceived. Mob's power is so utterly uncontrolled that even when he gently holds a spoon, it bends out of shape. Despite his immense strength, he performs terribly in his studies, which is why his mother constantly compares him to his younger brother, Ritsu. Mob enjoys going to school because his close friend, Tsubomi, whom he always notices, is there. After years of studying, he's barely managed to master basic addition. In sports, he's also absolutely terrible. And yet, as soon as his master Reigen calls him, he shows up immediately, because this is the only thing Mob can truly do well. When they arrived at the location, the master kept talking non-stop about his incredible power. Hearing him, one would naturally think he could handle it, so Mob calmly watched some ants building their nest, but it turned out the master came running out, pale with fright. At that very moment, Mob sensed an immense demonic energy emanating from the end of the tunnel, even though the master continued to advance confidently because he had backup, but the truth was that the poor boy had to bear the entire burden of his master. A horde of malevolent spirits suddenly appeared, but they were eliminated with surprising ease. Meanwhile, Reigen continued to act as if he were the true hero. Just as he was attempting to flee, he stumbled upon a muscular evil spirit. This spirit had died here in a racing accident due to a banana peel, but Mob protected Reigen from the attack with his power. Reigen then launched a special technique, putting salt in his hand and punching. But the spirit didn't even flinch, so once again, the apprentice had to do all the work. After Mob delivered the final blow, the spirit transformed into a tiny, harmless soul. Thanks to him, Reigen learned that the true boss of the evil spirits was located at the very end of the tunnel. It was a powerful entity that had resided on that mountain for over 100 years and had taken many lives. Although Reigen attempted to stop Mob, the boy had already ventured deep inside. With a single, decisive attack, Mob utterly destroyed the spirit known as the Boss. The souls of the victims were finally liberated, and they all expressed their profound gratitude to Mob. On their way back, Mob asked his master why he hadn't done anything at all. Reigen, with his typical carefree attitude, replied that he had left those weaker spirits for Mob to practice on. While his 8th grade classmates were enjoying their youth, some playing sports, others studying, Mob was working as an assistant to a fake psychic for 300 yen an hour. Reigen, for his part, was supposedly performing an exorcism on a client. In reality, he was merely giving them a massage, which is one of the very few things he actually knows how to do well. At the school's psychic club, since they didn't have the 5 necessary members to continue operating, the student council vice president, Tokugawa, ordered them to pack up their belongings, but the club members pleaded so earnestly that they were granted one final, desperate chance. They had to find the 5th member within a strict deadline of 2 days. Despite all their strenuous efforts to convince other students, they only received resounding rejections. In the end, they were fortunate enough to stumble upon Mob. To prevent the psychic club from disbanding entirely, President Tomo cried until her tears ran dry. Since Mob had an outstanding mission with Master Reigen, he promised to return the very next day. For this new assignment, both of them had to disguise themselves as girls to infiltrate an all-girls school and eliminate a malevolent spirit. However, the plan utterly failed when the guard stopped Reigen, noticing his legs were covered in long hair, so Mob had to enter the school alone and carry out the mission by himself. Upon reaching the rooftop, a group of female delinquents swept his face, but fortunately the real clients then appeared. They were 2 students who had reported strange occurrences to the school, but nobody believed them, so they searched for the cheapest exorcism center in the area and found Reigen. However, upon seeing Mob, they didn't place much trust in him, but since they had already called him, they decided to see just how good he truly was. Mob followed the monster's trail and sealed it away with a powerful charm on the basketball court. This enraged the creature, which then revealed its true form, leaving everyone absolutely terrified. But Mob didn't lose his composure. With incredible speed, he blocked the attack and swiftly counterattacked. Without hesitation, he eliminated the great evil spirit in an instant. Back at school, the psychic club members were terrified because the bodybuilding club was about to move into their room. At the very last minute, Mob decided to join the bodybuilding club, which caused President Tomo to gasp and then promptly faint. However, he barely runs for a short while before he's already sprawled out like a rag doll, which is why they carried him back to the psychic club. The other members didn't believe Mob possessed any real powers until they saw him in action and were left absolutely speechless. On his way back home, a masked woman attempted to lure him in with deceptive tricks. Mob ended up in an auditorium where he was thrown onto the stage and encountered a classmate who was part of the journalism club. She suspected that the cult leader used hypnosis to recruit followers, but even her friend was influenced by a strange smile upon putting on the mask. It seemed there was an external force compelling them to smile without any reason, even though deep down they felt absolutely no joy whatsoever. But Mob, feeling utterly disheartened, requested to withdraw, as not even the mask could make him genuinely laugh. Then, in an attempt to persuade him, the cult leader challenged him to compete against 3 of his most prominent disciples. The rule was crystal clear. Each participant had to fill their mouth with milk, and the first one to laugh would instantly lose. Bad luck for them that Mob absolutely loves milk, so he accepted without any hesitation. In a short amount of time, he easily defeated all 3 disciples, and then it was time to face the leader. The leader used a cup of milk with a strange flavor that made Mob unable to hold it in, causing him to spit it out, thus losing the duel. Enraged, Mob released everyone present from the hypnotic trance using his spiritual energy. However, the leader reacted immediately and regained control over everyone with his power. His words caused Mob to accumulate intense emotions, significantly elevating his spiritual power. It turned out that this leader was, in reality, a powerful evil spirit, who then gave the order for all his followers to attack Mob. At that very moment, Mob reached 100% of his power and, with a single, simple movement, sent everyone present flying through the air. The evil spirit lunged at him, but Mob hadn't even attacked yet and had already left it severely wounded. Then, the enemy fired a laser beam with all its might directly towards Mob, but the boy now possessed a truly monstrous power. Mob launched a psychic knife that completely pierced through the evil spirit. With its demise, all the hypnotized followers were finally liberated. At the high school, several students dressed in purple were being brutally beaten by a student named Tenga from the very same school as Mob. He was known by everyone as the Demon of Soli High School, but there's always someone even stronger. The boss of darkness, Teru, appeared and left Tenga pinned to the wall in less than a single second. Mob woke up and was utterly surprised to see that the evil spirit from the previous day was still following him all the way home. Since he had just woken up, he grabbed it by the head and gave it another thorough beating. This caused the spirit, known as Dimple, to panic and promise to behave well. But in reality, Dimple was merely waiting for the opportune moment to possess Mob's body. Mob went to see his master Reigen to ask him how to get rid of Dimple, but since the master possesses no spiritual power, he pretended that the spirit was so incredibly weak that he couldn't even perceive it. Meanwhile, Tenga, thoroughly beaten, returned, thinking of asking the guys from the bodybuilding club for help, but they were solely dedicated to physical training and wanted absolutely nothing to do with fights. Right after that, Tenga set his sights on Mob, noticing that he didn't have even an ounce of muscle. Upon checking his locker, Mob found a letter adorned with little hearts and other such drawings. Dimple, just by seeing the ugly handwriting, instantly knew it was a boy's writing, but Mob, being stubborn, went to the meeting place anyway. To make matters even worse, Tenga had also sent a letter provoking the entire Kurosu school. Upon learning that Mob had been captured, the guys from the bodybuilding club immediately went to rescue their fellow member. While Mob was tied to a chair, his muscular companions burst into Kurosu school. With just a few basic movements, they managed to easily defeat the students. Just like the previous time, they decided to call their leader Teru to take care of the entire problem. Mob immediately sensed that this blonde boy possessed an overwhelming spiritual energy. After just a few movements, Teru sent all the muscular guys flying through the air. Tenga attempted to defend himself, but he received a brutal spiritual blow directly to his body. Then, Mob appeared and used his power to easily untie himself. Teru was visibly surprised to discover that Mob was also a psychic with innate spiritual energy, but even so, he wanted to verify who the true boss in that place really was. He used all his strength to attack Mob, but Mob didn't suffer any damage whatsoever. Mob merely wanted to extend his hand to greet Teru, but that caused the other to panic and use his power to escape at full speed. Dimple believed that his master's power would be more than enough to defeat the blonde boy, but Mob made a firm decision. He would not use his spiritual powers against human beings. Even though Teru attacked him with everything he had, Mob stood his ground firmly. To Teru, anyone who didn't possess spiritual powers was nothing more than a simple, worthless human. When Mob fell to the ground, Dimple decided to risk his very life to protect him. With his last remaining strength, he transformed into a gigantic figure, but Teru eliminated him with a single, devastating blow. Mob's memories alongside Dimple flashed through his mind, and that caused his power to increase by an additional 50%. Teru, absolutely enraged, unleashed all his power against him with a series of devastating blows that aimed to completely finish him off. Then he used his ability to manipulate sharp knives with the clear intention of destroying Mob, but Mob merely defended himself calmly. The energy he used to block the attack caused the knives to reverse direction, and one of them cut Teru's fluffy mane. That made him look so utterly bad that he transformed his tie into a sword and attacked Mob directly, but Mob simply stood still, defending himself. Teru then lunged forward and began to strangle him with his bare hands, which caused the limit of Mob's power to significantly increase. Despite being on the very brink of death, Mob clearly remembered the time he used his spiritual power to protect his brother Ritsu from a delinquent. Finally, Teru released his hands when Mob fell unconscious, but just as he turned to leave, Mob's repressed power utterly exploded. At that moment, not even he himself knew how much strength he truly possessed. His spiritual energy absorbed power from both Teru and the surrounding environment. The entire place was utterly destroyed by that colossal force. For the second time, Mob had used his powers against another human being, which caused him to break down in tears. It was then that he reached 100% of his power. With that immense energy, he reconstructed everything that had been destroyed. Teru, at long last, understood his grave error and promised never again to use his spiritual power against other people. Thus, the battle finally ended. Mob, however, felt incredibly sad. He had been standing in the rain for 3 hours and still hadn't managed to find Dimple. In a dream, Ritsu felt utterly fascinated by Mob's spiritual energy, as it would allow both of them to play together. This younger brother also wished that someday he would awaken his own spiritual power, just like his older brother. At midnight, he tried, in every possible way, to awaken his powers, but absolutely nothing happened. For his part, Tenga continued searching for someone strong enough to defeat Teru, but without any success. Mob was being interrogated by the president of the Psychic Club, who directly questioned him about the battle that had occurred days earlier. He confessed that there indeed had been a spiritual combat with Teru. In fact, that blonde boy was the very first psychic Mob had ever truly met. Upon leaving, Tenga went to apologize to Mob for the fake letter, but Ritsu happened to see them from a distance and believed his brother was being intimidated. In a student council meeting alongside President Komuro, Ritsu proposed an idea: to firmly sanction problematic students, with the aim of creating a peaceful environment for Mob. On his way back home, Ritsu received a business card from a mysterious man. This man proposed that he join his organization to awaken the spiritual power that lay dormant within him. The man had mistaken him for his brother Mob and took him to a laboratory. Meanwhile, Mob was strolling with Takane and detected the spiritual energy of an adult psychic who was supremely powerful. Returning to Ritsu, the man who introduced himself as Mitsura showed him other children with supposed spiritual powers. One child could barely manage to bend a spoon with all their effort. Another could barely produce a flame weaker than a common market lighter. As for Mitsura himself, apart from money, he doesn't possess even a single shred of spiritual energy. His dream is to establish a laboratory to attempt to awaken the spiritual energy within himself. The next day, at school, the student council president devised a plan to frame Tenga by hiding flutes belonging to several girls in his desk when the class became agitated over the disappearance of those items. Komuro, together with Ritsu, executed the plan to falsely blame Tenga. Although Tenga was someone who usually resolved everything with violence, at that moment, there was no trace of that left. Even the girl he deeply cared for looked at him with utter contempt. Ritsu thought long and hard about what he had done and ended up confessing to Mitsura that, in reality, he possessed no spiritual power whatsoever. But right at that moment, Mitsura noticed that the spoon Ritsu had thrown had been deformed by an impressive unseen force. On his way home, Ritsu witnessed the appearance of a malevolent spirit. It was Dimple. The rumor that someone had defeated Teru spread rapidly throughout the school. That person was given the nickname YT Poison, although their true identity still remained a complete mystery. All the leaders of the neighboring schools shared a common objective: to defeat YT Poison. Dimple returned from the ashes, but his spiritual energy was still incredibly weak. As is customary between brothers, the first thing they did was beat him up before even talking to him. During their conversation, Ritsu discovered that his spiritual energy had awakened due to repressed emotions. Dimple promised him that if they cooperated, he could someday even surpass his brother Mob. Taking advantage of a lapse in attention, the spirit attempted to possess Ritsu's body, but, having very little energy, it failed to control him. Ritsu's desire to have powers had come true, but everything was being manipulated by Dimple, as Ritsu himself still couldn't use his spiritual energy on his own. At school, Ritsu and President Komuro began to crack down on all the problematic students, using the same method to frame them as perverts. Unintentionally, they caused permanent emotional wounds in many of them. Dimple understood that Ritsu's spiritual power was developing, fueled by corruption and guilt. Once Ritsu obtained that power, he became a completely different person, utterly fearless when confronting anyone. Right at that moment, Teru appeared wearing a fake wig. He advised Ritsu not to use his spiritual energy against people, a lesson he himself had learned after his intense combat with Mob. However, Ritsu, now filled with newfound power, only wanted to demonstrate his strength. One of the leaders who sought to uncover the identity of YT Poison was brutally beaten by Mob's younger brother. Afterward, other famous delinquents also arrived, but this time, the one who received a thorough beating was none other than President Komuro himself. Leaders from neighboring schools continued to appear. Teru, observing everything from the sidelines, immediately informed Mob about what was happening. A mysterious psychic who had appeared earlier was also present, carefully watching how far Ritsu's power would go before taking any action. Using his own spiritual energy, this individual cruelly attacked everyone present. Ever since his power awakened, Ritsu began to feel a deep, burning desire to be admired. But suddenly, Mob appeared right behind him. Teru had warned Mob in time about an imposter who was impersonating him and causing fights with the most feared leaders in the area. Mob ran with all his might to the location, and upon arriving realized that it was his own brother who was involved. Instead of scolding him, Mob remained serene because he knew that above all else they were still brothers. He approached those injured by Ritsu and knelt down to ask for their forgiveness. The mysterious psychic had also sent a photo of Ritsu to the scarred individual at the laboratory, making it clear that everyone involved had now been identified. Immediately, Koyama appeared, a guy with a horsemane hairstyle, and directly attacked Ritsu. Everyone who attempted to resist was mercilessly beaten by him. Mob tried to intervene and increase his energy, but Koyama knocked him down with a brutal kick. Brutal. As he was leaving, Mob used his power to protect his brother. Immediately, the guy realized that Mob was a true psychic and relentlessly attacked him with overwhelming force. His spiritual barrier could no longer withstand the assault. Ritsu attempted to intervene to defend him, but he ended up being severely wounded. That unleashed the complete awakening of Mob's supreme power, reaching 100%. Immediately, the entire situation took a dramatic turn. Mob could no longer control his own body, unleashing a series of devastating attacks directly upon Koyama. Seeing the situation spiraling completely out of control, Dimple fled to find Teru. Mob's power had reached its absolute breaking point just as the true uniform of the mysterious white tea was finally revealed. Poison. Everyone present was left in complete and utter astonishment. But right at that very moment, Koyama played dirty, using a vial containing a potent drug that caused Mob to instantly pass out. As he planned to eliminate all the witnesses, Mob suddenly stood up, causing Koyama to flee in sheer terror. Though in reality it was Teru who was holding him up, using his spiritual power to simulate Mob's standing. When Mob regained consciousness, Teru explained to him that his brother Ritsu had been kidnapped by an organization known as Claw, comprised of unbalanced psychics. Their ultimate goal is to initiate a revolution to completely overthrow the existing world order. Currently, their power is absolutely overwhelming, as they boast over 100 recruited psychics. Claw captures psychics and then brainwashes them to join their ranks. Although these psychics don't possess innate spiritual powers, their sheer strength in numbers poses a truly considerable threat. Teru obtained this crucial information after becoming the victim of an attempted kidnapping. Then, Dimple pointed them to the laboratory's location where they might find data regarding Ritsu. Mitsura, upon waking, confessed he never knew any Ritsu, as all the information was always confused with Mob's. From the information they extracted from Koyama, it was revealed that another extremely powerful psychic existed, which immediately caught Mr. Terada's attention, who saw a golden opportunity in this. He immediately went in search of Mob to capture him. Meanwhile, Koyama and another psychic thought Terada was winning and torturing the boy, but in reality, it was he who was being brutally tortured by Teru. It was already too late for him. They had stumbled upon two students who were completely out of the ordinary. Under pressure, Terada revealed the location and information about the war leaders. At a high-ranking meeting of the Claw organization, all the leaders bore scars as a mark of identity. One of the bosses, wearing a mask, arrived to convey the message from the great leader. He would return to Japan the following month and choose 2 members from that branch to take them to headquarters. In the prison, the leader called one of the captured young psychics and demanded that he demonstrate his spiritual power. Seeing the boy try to hide it, he stabbed him in front of the others as a warning to anyone else who might attempt to do the same. Terada guided Mob and Teru to the Claw base, but upon arrival, he tried to betray them by launching an attack against Teru. Mob had to intervene and immediately defeated him with a single powerful blow. Meanwhile, in the prison, Ritsu decided to organize an escape before it was too late. With the help of his fellow psychics, he managed to get out. The guards tried to stop him, but Ritsu easily overcame them with his spiritual energy. Mob and Teru managed to defeat 2 guards and infiltrate the base alongside Dimple. Koyama recognized Mob as the one who had crushed him before, so he volunteered to face him. But as soon as he appeared, Mob obliterated him with his power, leaving him completely unrecognizable. The entire military force of the Claw organization was mobilized to stop the 3 intruders. Dimple ran into a small group, but with a single blow, he knocked them all out. Then Matsuo, a high-ranking Claw commander, appeared. Meanwhile, Teru also eliminated several henchmen with a single movement, but he was surprised by an enormous burst of flame. The attacker was Miyagawa, another one of Claw's high-level bosses. Although Teru used energy barriers to dodge the attacks, the intense heat was clearly affecting him. He knew that psychics who manipulate fire cannot attack and defend themselves simultaneously. Taking advantage of that, Teru encapsulated Miyagawa with his own barrier, causing him to burn with his own fire. But right after, 2 new Claw bosses appeared. One of them seized a moment of distraction and captured Teru. For his part, Mob was busy fighting against the puppets of one of Claw's psychics. a puppeteer named Mukai, who manipulated dolls with spiritual energy. Meanwhile, Ritsu and his group confronted several foot soldiers whom they easily defeated until a boy of their same age suddenly appeared. This new enemy had no scars on his face, so he didn't appear to be one of Claw's leaders, but his power was truly impressive. Ritsu decided to stay and confront him, knowing he was no match, with the goal of buying time for his companions to escape. On the other hand, the puppeteer cried inconsolably because her puppets had been destroyed by Mob. Then, Tsucha, another high-ranking boss, arrived to avenge the damage done to her comrade. She used devastating blows with demonic energy that overwhelmed Mob without him responding. Mob just cried, remembering Master Raigen's lesson that you don't hit a woman, not even with a flower petal. Meanwhile, Dimple was being pursued at full speed by evil spirits, as the new enemy boss could control them as if they were pets. Even so, with cunning, Dimple managed to get close to this high-ranking enemy, but he didn't count on the fact that this foe not only had 2 evil spirits under his control, but 2 more evil spirits were summoned and captured Dimple. Tsucha, for her part, was also defeated by Mob's power. The division leader tried to stop White Tie Poison using his technique, but he too was completely vanquished by Mob. Later on, Mob found his brother Ritsu lying unconscious by the side of the road. A leader with hypnosis abilities appeared and created an illusion of Ritsu's death, which caused Mob to unleash 100% of his power. The enemy was completely destroyed. All members of Mob's attack team were captured. The most unfortunate was Dimple, who was locked up with 100 evil spirits inside a poisonous jar. The only way to survive was to become the strongest after devouring the others. Following the signal from Mob's phone, Master Raigen headed towards the location. Teru noticed that everyone was locked in a room that nullified spiritual energy, preventing any psychic from using their powers. Ritsu, remembering everything he had done, broke down in tears. Outside, the guards encountered Raigen. Due to his behavior and manner of speaking, they thought he was a high-ranking claw commander sent from headquarters, so they respectfully escorted him inside the base. The psychics captured alongside Ritsu were released by Raigen's order. Teru was shocked to learn that Mob's master seemed to be an important figure within the Claw organization. Raigen ordered everyone released, but the situation became complicated when Ishiguro, head of the 7th Division, denied that he was a leader. Immediately, Ishiguro attacked Raigen, but Teru and Mob blocked the assault. Everyone expected to see the true power of White Tea Poison to get out of there. An overwhelming gravitational force fell upon Mob, while Raigen took the opportunity to advance and deliver a kick to the enemy's face. Then, he used his hypnosis technique and finished with another blow. The high-ranking claw leaders were enraged at having been struck by a fake psychic. Ishiguro's destructive gravitational force tore through part of the building's roof. An intense battle began between the scarred-faced leaders and the Mob brothers along with Teru. Mob seemed to be on the verge of losing control upon seeing how his brother Ritsu and Teru were being completely overwhelmed. When his power indicator reached 99%, it was Master Raigen who managed to stop him just in time. Raigen considered that if the situation became too dangerous, it was no dishonor to retreat. At that moment, Mob remembered the first time he sought out Raigen to tell him about his spiritual energy. The master calmly explained that spiritual energy was just another characteristic of being human. There are intelligent people, others who run fast. It was just that natural. Raigen witnessed Mob's true power and decided to accept him as a disciple to assist in the task of exercising spirits. Back in the present, the master was struck by a lethal cut from one of the high-level leaders, falling to the ground. This caused Mob to completely lose control of his power. Ritsu noticed that his brother's face reflected a total loss of control. The worst was about to happen for the high-ranking claw leaders. But, unexpectedly, Raigen stood up after the fatal cut. Even a second brutal blow from the scarred-faced leader failed to injure him. With a simple touch, he broke the sharpest sword. The strongest evil spirit was instantly destroyed by Raigen's power. The enemy clones were also eliminated with a simple wave of his hand. What no one knew was that part of Mob's power had been temporarily transferred to Raigen's body. Ishiguro's supreme dark spheres were destroyed by Raigen, as if they were mere soap bubbles. Then, the division chief used all his power to launch direct attacks, but none managed to affect Raigen. Thanks to his ability to convince and guide others, Raigen managed to pull the high-ranking leaders out of the control of their illusion of power. Ishiguro, now with an aged appearance, tried to stop Raigen, but the Claw apprentice who had fought Ritsu earlier was the one who stopped him, finishing off the head of the 7th Division. The latter expressed his disappointment towards Mob, leaving the young man without understanding what had happened. Finally, 2 of the high-ranking leaders returned to a normal life, as Claw's 7th Division had completely collapsed. Dimple, after recovering his power, managed to escape the poisonous jar, although he no longer felt like fighting anyone. Master Raigen could now also see evil spirits with his own eyes. Everyone managed to return safely. Mob went back to school to try and catch a glimpse of a certain person he liked. Ritsu and President Komuro decided to apologize to Tenga, although he wasn't the least bit upset. In reality, the reason so many people rejected him had nothing to do with the stolen flutes. They simply wanted to expel him from school. Mob continued with his jogging routines, but he always fainted at the same point in the route due to sheer exhaustion. Dimple, for his part, began using his power to handle small exorcisms on behalf of Master Reigen, replacing Mob. In a distant rural area, Reigen and Mob embarked on another exorcism mission. A farmer explained to them that for years, something had been destroying his crops. After inspecting the land, Reigen confirmed that both the soil and the fertilizer were in perfect condition. Suddenly, a nearby scarecrow revealed its true form, an evil spirit. Mob eliminated it with a simple movement, but it turned out that wasn't the real enemy. The spirit entered a nearby tree and took control, attacking both of them. With his power, Mob managed to regain control of the tree and force the spirit to show its original form. Although it was intimidating, it fell defeated after receiving a single destructive blow from Mob. Reigen received his reward in kind, fertilizer and seeds, as the farmer had lost several harvests and had no money. Mob also received his payment, a bag of broccoli seeds. Misato, the girl Mob had previously saved, founded a sect called the Psycho Helmet Psychic Church. She kept Mob's identity a secret and named him Supreme Leader with many followers. Although, to be honest, that clueless boy could hardly lead anyone. The student council president publicly admitted all his mistakes and announced he would resign from his position after his speech. Hearing this, Misato ran to find Mob to push him as the new president. She convinced him by using his crush as a bribe, and Mob accepted without hesitation. After so much effort and preparation, Mob became one of the 4 candidates for the position. But when he stepped onto the stage, he stood there for 5 minutes unable to say a single word, mouth agape, completely paralyzed. Another day, while checking his locker, Mob received a love letter from a girl named Emi. From then on, Mob began to enjoy life more by spending time with her, although he was still in love with Takan. He even ate more than usual, until one day, Emi took him to a field and confessed that everything they had experienced had been part of a bet between her and her friends. She made him hope, and then she left him. Telling him she loved him only to treat him like a game is not okay. Don't do that. Mob was left alone, sadly remembering the happy moments they spent that week. Afterward, Emi's friends mocked her and tore the precious novel she was writing into pieces. Mob went there and began to carefully pick up each fragment. Emi, moved by the gesture, decided to help him. When they were about to finish, a gust of wind carried all the papers away, but Mob used his spiritual energy to carefully collect and return the novel to her. Emi felt very happy about that. Due to a lack of clients, Master Reigen decided that he and Mob would investigate cases of urban legends. These were rumors about supernatural events in certain localities. According to the plan, Reigen and Mob went to a nearby town and set up a spiritual consultation table on the street. However, the table looked somewhat improvised. Soon after, a burly man who introduced himself as a psychic named Shinra appeared and kicked them out of the spot. But Master Reigen didn't stay silent and responded firmly. The discussion stopped when a client arrived, asking them to eliminate the urban legends that were causing fear among the town's inhabitants. Reigen and the psychic Shinra split up to investigate. Mob asked Dimple to follow and protect Shinra, as he noticed there was something very strange in that town. Shinra followed a subject known as the Red Raincoat Man into the forest, but he launched an electrical attack that left him unconscious. It turned out that the attacker was just an ordinary human with no powers who used the raincoat to scare the populace. Suddenly, Kuchisake Onna appeared and launched an attack, dragging the Red Raincoat Man towards the river. Right at that moment, Shinra regained consciousness and tried to use a spiritual sealing technique on her, but Kuchisake Onna completely surpassed him in power. Kuchisake Onna threw Shinra into the water, which forced Dimple to temporarily possess his body to rescue him just in time. Noticing the overwhelming force of the enemy attacks, Dimple decided to call for reinforcements. The enemy, growing increasingly furious, used her arms to launch a series of brutal attacks that left Shinra gravely wounded. Just as Kuchisake Onna's sword was about to reach Dimple, Mob appeared and deflected the attack with a single blow. Reigen tried to take a photo to use as evidence, but the phone's camera couldn't capture Kuchisake Onna. Taking advantage of the distraction, Kuchisake Onna escaped by submerging herself in the water. After an analysis by Shinra, Reigen understood that Kuchisake Onna grew stronger by feeding on the fear provoked by urban legends. As they were about to retreat, everyone was trapped by the woman's energy. Mob was the one who confronted her directly. As always, that mushroom head feared nothing, and the ghost was eliminated. After that, their next objective would be to find the lightning old woman. Upon reaching the tunnel, the old woman appeared. Mob tried to attack her with his spiritual power, but he quickly realized that she was far too strong. It turned out she was just an old runner. Mob ended up on the ground crying in frustration. He trained every day to run, and yet he was outrun by an old lady. Ever since Reigen created a website to promote his spiritual counseling services, many clients began to arrive. For example, a man came asking to curse his enemy for an absurd reason, but Reigen immediately rejected his request. However, after receiving a threat from the client, he wrote curse symbols on a piece of paper and handed it to him as a scam to get rid of him. Then a group of students wanted to take souvenir photos in a haunted house. Although Reigen wasn't very keen, he ended up accepting due to financial necessity. After a 30-minute drive, they arrived at an old, spooky house. Reigen took some photos for them, but when he asked for payment, the students mocked him, saying there was no police or authority there. Not only did they not pay him, but they left him behind with Mob, forcing them to walk all the way back. The next morning, the same students returned, frightened because a spirit had appeared in one of the photos, so, unable to refuse, Reigen and Mob had to embark on another mission. Upon arriving at the location, Mob saw 3 spirits belonging to a family. Reigen ordered him to exorcise them immediately, as the client was completely terrified. As Mob prepared to act, he heard the spirits' pleas and understood that in reality, they had never harmed anyone. Hearing that, he refused to attack them. The client, however, insisted non-stop, which made Reigen nervous, who again pressured Mob. But when the father's spirit knelt and bowed its head, Mob began to lose control. He only wanted to protect that family from the afterlife, and he was about to attack Reigen's own client. The master understood that his request had overstepped his disciples' boundaries. For Mob, whether human or not, everyone deserved compassion. Finally, Reigen symbolically performed the exorcism to calm the client, and then he retreated with Mob, while the spirits remained behind, happy. Reigen received a commission from a very wealthy client. Upon arriving at the mansion, he encountered many other psychics, including Mr. Yodo, president of the Sun Spiritual Alliance. The client was an extremely wealthy investment company director. When the situation was revealed, he explained that his daughter was possessed by a very powerful evil spirit. He offered an enormous cash reward to whoever could successfully expel it. Reigen, hearing that, immediately stepped forward to accept the mission, also promising a bonus for Mob. However, as there were many psychics present, they decided the order to enter the room by playing rock, paper, scissors. In such games, Reigen was practically invincible, so he managed to be the first to enter. During the conversation, the girl insisted that her father was the one who was possessed. The other psychics began to think that the true target of the exorcism should be the father, but Reigen noticed something unusual. The girl constantly changed the way she referred to him. When she was discovered, the evil spirit within her manifested and attacked, causing a shockwave that shattered mirror fragments throughout the entire room. The other psychics used all sorts of techniques to try and exorcise Lente, but only Reigen remained calm. He had already heard from Dimple the story of a supreme psychic named Mogami Keiji. 40 years ago, Mogami Keiji was a very famous psychic, but when his mother fell gravely ill, he started murdering people to get money for her treatment. In one of his confrontations with Dimple, Mogami absorbed spiritual energy from evil spirits to become one of the most powerful. Back in the present, the psychics present tried to resist, but they were brutally defeated. Reigen was also subdued by Mogami. At that moment, the businessman ran to embrace his daughter, but the evil spirit didn't hesitate to mercilessly attack him. Then he lashed out at the weaker psychics, which forced Mob to intervene. Although he used all his power, he couldn't hurt him. Mob made the decision to enter the girl's body to confront Mogami from within. Dimple was left in charge of protecting Mob's physical body. Finally, Mob managed to enter the girl's inner consciousness. There, Mogami attacked him with all his power, but Mob responded with a blow that made him fragment. It seemed the boy had won, but Mogami appeared from behind and knocked him out. Then he altered Mob's memory, making him completely forget his spiritual energy. Within the world created by Mogami, Mob was a miserable boy. He was despised and constantly bullied by his peers. In that reality, the businessman's daughter was a bully who enjoyed mistreating others. Outside, Dimple was growing increasingly worried, as more than 30 minutes had passed and Mob hadn't returned. Reigen, on the other hand, fully trusted his disciples' abilities and decided to wait. Meanwhile, in Mogami's illusory world, Mob was sinking into dark thoughts. He discovered that after his mother's death, Mogami changed completely. He was willing to eliminate anyone who caused unhappiness to others, even the 14-year-old girl. She tormented Mob cruelly, seeing him as an object for her amusement, until he lost control and unleashed his spiritual energy against those who mistreated him. Outside, Dimple tried to enter the girl's soul to bring Mob back. With the help of Matsu, the scarred-faced head of the 7th Division, he finally managed to get in. At that moment, Mob forgave the girl, but was attacked by another enemy from behind, which provoked an uncontrollable fury. Mogami's words fueled his hatred, pushing him to the brink of wanting to kill him. However, Dimple appeared just in time, punched him in the face, and helped Mob regain his memories. In the end, Mogami failed in his attempt to corrupt Mob. Mob's power reached 99%. With just a few movements, he managed to completely dissipate the evil spirit's soul, but immediately, a new spirit appeared, much more powerful than all the previous ones, and fiercely attacked Mob. Tragic chants were heard from many souls present in the world created by Mogami. At that instant, Mob remembered the reason why he had entered there. His power was fully unleashed upon reaching 100%, allowing him to fulfill his objective. With that surge, he completely defeated Mogami. Mogami understood that when Mob lost control, he transformed into someone completely different, with terrifying energy. Although he managed to defeat Mogami, the evil spirits continued to attack him with devastating force. At that moment, Mob reached a new level, taking on a true spiritual form. With that immense power, he swept away all the evil spirits from Mogami's world and managed to awaken. Mogami's soul, attempting to flee, was captured by Matsu, who quickly retreated. The girl's father was treated for his injuries, which were believed to be fatal, but he managed to survive. In gratitude, he transferred a huge sum of money to the Psycho Helmet Psychic cult. Finally, after so many years of scamming people, Master Reigen appeared on television as a professional psychic. In this broadcast, several psychics were summoned to exorcise a child possessed after playing with a Ouija board. Mr. Yodo, president of the Spiritual Sun Alliance, who was previously humiliated by Mogami, saw this as a perfect opportunity to get revenge on Reigen. He managed to get Reigen to be the first to perform the exorcism on camera. Although he had no real abilities, Reigen acted with complete naturalness. He showed all his secret powers live on air, scattering salt, throwing his famous punch, but after 30 minutes, the situation showed no progress. Then, when time ran out and it was Psychic Yodo's turn, he uttered a scathing remark. He said the child was just acting and that there was no possession. Reigen was completely embarrassed and didn't know where to hide. The career of the supposed great psychic Reigen practically came to an end. From that moment on, rumors about his ineptitude spread across all social media. Reigen became the center of national and international attention, being harassed by journalists who wanted to get statements from him. After receiving a letter from his mother, Reigen decided to give a press conference and tell the whole truth. He was asked many difficult questions, but he answered them all frankly, although his responses didn't fully convince the press. At that moment, he reflected on his past when he had left his formal employment. What led him to the spiritual world was a newspaper advertisement that promised to earn money quickly. After approximately a year in the trade, he was about to leave the psychic profession, but meeting Mob changed everything. Reigen realized that he had been using the boy for his own benefit, which caused him great remorse. Suddenly, an earthquake shook the press room. Cameras and microphones began to float in the air. Everyone thought it was Reigen's spiritual power, but in reality, it was Mob who had come to get him out of trouble. During the conversation, Reigen discovered that the boy had always considered him a good person. Masato continued working with great dedication on the construction of the Psycho Helmet Psychic cult. They already had over 700 members. Although none knew the true identity of the founder, the building where they met was acquired thanks to anonymous donations. She believed that if Mob appeared publicly, the cult would grow even more. Masato went to find Mob and asked him to use his spiritual powers during the upcoming school marathon to introduce himself to the cult members. This was because at Reigen's press conference, some had already noticed the shield of the high school Mob attended. Mob, for his part, planned to participate in the marathon and try his best to finish in the top 10 and declare his love for Tsubomi. Teru also supported him, giving him a new pair of sneakers, although in reality, it was because he had bought the wrong size, not out of generosity. Reigen, upon learning that Mob was going to participate in such an important race, decided to temporarily suspend his work so that the boy could fully concentrate on his training. Mob trained with great dedication thanks to the support of everyone around him. To take care of exorcism tasks during his preparation, Reigen arranged for Ritsu and Teru to help in his place, but suddenly, Tsubomi and a classmate arrived at the spiritual counseling office seeking guidance on matters of love. Tsubomi, in investigative mode, already knew that Mob had worked there, as the room was full of his photos plastered on the wall. To test Reigen's scamming abilities, she invented a story about being in love with a boy from another school. Unintentionally, Ritsu overheard the conversation and began to worry a lot about his brother. Finally, the day of the marathon arrived. As soon as the race began, Mob tripped and hurt his leg. But, even so, he got up determined, spurred on by the encouragement of those present. Reigen ran to his side to cheer him on, but Mob ended up fainting from the effort. Upon waking, he learned that his brother Ritsu had finished in 9th place, which cheered him up a bit. While at home, his parents were preparing a special meal for Mob. Shu, the young orange-haired member of the Claw organization, appeared. Ritsu recognized him as the one who had attacked him in the 7th Division, but it was already too late. When Mob returned, his house was engulfed in flames. He entered using his spiritual energy, as if he had no soul. He tried to calm himself, convinced that everything would be fine. His father was very strict, his mother always careful with fire, and Ritsu should be there. But upon opening the bedroom door, the bodies were burning violently. It was then that Mob lost all control. His energy surpassed 100% and was unleashed. Dimple believed the corpses were just illusions created by the enemy to unbalance Mob. An enormous energy exploded throughout the city. Like a furious meteor, Mob descended from the sky to block the path of the enemy psychics. Teru had also been attacked by another psychic. Amidst the chaos, the mushroom head lunged with bristling hair and sent a psychic flying with a single blow. Afterward, a thug was knocked out by Mob's devastating punches, left lying on the ground unable to move. Then, he discovered that they were only heading towards his house and that the true culprit had not yet been identified. Suddenly, 2 psychics from Claw's 7th Division appeared to take Mob to meet Reigen and his friends. Those former enemies, the Scarred Leaders, had now become allies, united against the greater threat of the Claw organization. Dimple recounted all the events to the group. Reigen understood that Dimple said those corpses were illusions to calm Mob, but he didn't really know if it was true, and they could be dead. Then, Reigen approached to comfort the boy, assuring him that his family was still alive. Upon hearing this, Mob stopped agonizing and lost consciousness. Teru arrived shortly after, having defeated the enemy psychic. After torturing him by submerging him in water, the enemy confessed that the leader of the Claw organization, Suzuki Toichiro, had already gathered the most powerful psychics in the world to execute his plan for global domination. At the Claw base, Toichiro formally initiated this plan. His elite group, the 5 Miracles, faithfully supported him. Hattori, one of them, used his psychic power to broadcast live the attack with which they intended to destroy the country. After seeing this in a broadcast sent by his father, Sho decided to stop him. Meanwhile, Mob's parents were safe, protected in a hotel thanks to Sho's arrangements. Knowing this, Ritsu calmed down and agreed to help. Within the Claw organization, each member with spiritual powers was ordered to eliminate 1,000 armed soldiers. The government psychics tried to rebel from within, but were easily annihilated by the 5 Miracles, who demonstrated overwhelming force against the state's defenders. During a conference by the Prime Minister Shimasaki, one of the 5 Miracles appeared to attack him. Despite strong security measures, weapons did not harm him, and in an instant he captured the Prime Minister using his teleportation ability. Teru arrived in time to intervene, but he was no match for Shimasaki, who defeated him with a few blows combined with instantaneous movements. The terrorist organization Claw took the Culture Tower as its base of operations after kidnapping the Prime Minister. Teru managed to survive the confrontation with Shimasaki, but for the first time, he realized that his strength was not enough. He understood that opposing Claw was almost impossible. The government army surrounded the tower, but the artificial psychics created by Claw surpassed anything imaginable. Their power was so great that they lifted the entire building as if it were a toy. In a matter of minutes, much of the city was destroyed. Master Reigen was furious to see that the insurance company refused to cover the damages to his burned office. Given the situation, he had no choice but to assume the role of commander of the group, which would directly attack the headquarters of the Claw organization. Meanwhile, Sho and Ritsu easily defeated the minions guarding the lower levels of the tower. Suddenly, Minagishi, one of the 5 Miracles, an expert in matter manipulation, appeared. For Sho to be able to move forward and confront his father, 3 of his subordinates stayed behind to fight him. Reigen's team carried out a diversionary offensive to disorient the enemies. Sho's subordinates fought with great coordination. One attacked, another defended, and the last provided healing support. Mob still remained deeply asleep. Reigen detected an intrusion into the base and tried to escape, but ended up being found. Using his wit, Reigen tricked the invaders by spraying a psychic repellent spray that knocked them unconscious. However, one of the muscular leaders of the 5 Miracles woke up shortly after and attacked him, almost killing him. Just when the situation was critical, Dimple possessed Mob's body, dodging the enemy's brutal blows and counterattacking before fleeing. Elsewhere, the group of Scarred Leaders from Squad 4 found the advance team. It was then that Terada betrayed the group, revealing that he was pretending to be against Claw, causing great commotion. Sho's subordinates were finally defeated by Minagishi's power. In another location, Shimasaki discovered Reigen's 2nd squad under the sewers. Dimple, infiltrated among the crowd, came out of hiding when he saw that Takano was in danger, taking the blow for her. This caused him to be expelled from Mob's body, but luckily, he was caught by a member of the bodybuilding club. The muscular enemy burst in and attacked, defeating the club group with ease. At the critical moment, the club leader stepped in to protect Mob. Dimple took advantage and possessed him, using the hard-earned musculature to brutally strike the enemy. However, real strength always surpasses borrowed strength. When it seemed that everything was over, the enemy got up for one last attack, but Mob intervened just in time and completely defeated him. Finally, Sho and Ritsu managed to reach the underground levels of the cultural tower. The army led by the doormen managed, with ease and teamwork, to defeat the last enemy of the Claw organization's attack wave. Terada managed to deceive them as he no longer intended to rejoin Claw. After defeating a division of Raigen's group, Shimazaki turned to Sho and Ritsu to block their path. Although they knew they were facing the strongest of the 5 miracles, Ritsu gave his all to stop him and allow Sho to advance to the top of the tower. As expected of a member of the 5 miracles, Shimazaki completely overpowered Ritsu with overwhelming attacks. For his part, Sho managed to defeat another leader and continue his way to the upper floors. Meanwhile, Claw's minions took advantage of the chaos to loot everywhere, but they had the bad luck of crossing paths with Mob. Minagishi also appeared, using plants to attack relentlessly. The minions' collaboration further complicated the combat for Mob. Although Ritsu was brutally beaten, he refused to surrender to Shimazaki. In that desperate moment, the scarred leaders of Teru's squad arrived to attack Shimazaki. However, the power difference was enormous. He was in a completely superior league. The psychics from Raigen's group were severely wounded one after another. Mob also faced Minagishi's overwhelming force. Just then, Matsu, the leader of Division 7 and an expert in controlling evil spirits, arrived to help. He released a group of giant spirits, but Minagishi destroyed them with ease. In a moment of carelessness, the sealed flask fell and a frightened subordinate tried to prevent it from opening, but it was already too late. All nearby evil spirits were absorbed by the contents of the flask. The supreme spirit Mogami had been released. Mogami trapped Minagishi as if he were a simple toy. Mob begged him to spare his life, and Mogami agreed. Before leaving, he gave Mob some words of warning to help him mature. Meanwhile, Sho reached his father. However, Toichiro's power was completely superior. He mercilessly attacked his son with devastating blows. It seemed that Sho had managed to defeat him with an explosive attack he had accumulated for 3 months. But Serizawa, Toichiro's most loyal subordinate, intercepted the blow with ease. In response, Toichiro launched his own technique based on 20 years of accumulated energy, so that his son could feel the true difference between them. At the front of Master Raigen's attack team, the situation continued to worsen as Shimazaki continued to completely dominate them. Even Teru was brutally defeated when confronting him. However, he finally managed to decipher Shimazaki's movement pattern. This changed the course of the combat, as the enemy could no longer stay focused. Taking advantage of that moment, the scarred leaders lunged at him and managed to give him a memorable beating. Just when it seemed that Shimazaki had been defeated, he concentrated 100% of his power against the psychics. His mental vision technique now made him more imposing than ever. One by one, the members of Raigen's squad were struck with colossal force. It was then that a colossal spiritual energy appeared that seriously worried Shimazaki. Mob's arrival caused him to lose concentration, at which point Raigen took the opportunity to surprisingly strike him with all his might. Shimazaki was bewildered to see that his mental vision could not detect the master, because Raigen is not a psychic. His confusion grew even more when he saw everyone calling him master, and faced with that, he decided to retreat. Ritsu arrived to report that their parents were safe, which reassured Mob. Thus, he decided to advance alone into the tower to confront the leader of the Claw organization. As soon as he entered, Mob met Serizawa. He told him that 3 years ago, when his life was at its darkest moment, the head of the organization appeared and pulled him out of that abyss. Serizawa possessed overwhelming spiritual power that he could not control. The umbrella that Toichiro gave him was the key for him to moderate his energy and reintegrate into society. Although Mob tried to reason with him, he failed to convince him to change sides. Both began an intense battle, until Mob took advantage of the emotional bond that united them to snatch the umbrella. Upon losing it, Serizawa also lost control over his energy. In the past, he had already had a similar episode that led him to unintentionally lift his own mother into the air. Desperate, Serizawa launched his most powerful attack against Mob, but Mob absorbed his energy and, in doing so, felt all the pain the other carried. Afterward, Mob returned that energy, making Serizawa truly comprehend that the young man, too, had endured profound suffering. The parallel narratives of their lives led them to a mutual understanding, and rather than persisting in their conflict, they ultimately forged a friendship. At the very pinnacle of the tower, Ritsu made a startling discovery. His father's true, inherent power was the ability to absorb the spiritual energy from other psychics, and he could also, at will, transfer that immense power to anyone right in the middle of Shu's most critical dire moment. Then, Mob precisely when they cease to be of any use to him, Serizawa, his most reliable and trusted assistant, has very powers he had previously bestowed upon Shu then warns Mob about the colossal, immense energy his father has accumulated and his formidable abilities. But Mob, too, has learned how to share his own power effectively. Immediately, Toichiro recognizes Mob as his one true, formidable rival and launches a direct, powerful attack. Mob responds with his very first offensive move and quickly, almost instantly, perceives that Toichiro's overwhelming power far surpasses absolutely everything he had ever faced or encountered before. Mob is brutally, relentlessly beaten again and again by the boss. Just at that critical moment, Master Reigen makes his dramatic appearance. Although he possesses absolutely no spiritual energy whatsoever, enraged beyond measure, Toichiro resolutely lunges forward with a clear intention of killing him. But Serizawa, with incredible speed, manages to intercept it just in the nick of time. However, his trusty umbrella is utterly and completely destroyed, shattered by the devastating immense impact. Mob finally reaches a full 100% of his incredible power. Nevertheless, Serizawa and Master Reigen are both violently thrown into the void by the relentless attacks, but Minagishi intervenes, ensuring they land safely and without harm. Mob then lunges at Toichiro with every ounce of his strength, but with only a mere 10% of his power, Toichiro strikes him back with enormous, brutal violence. This powerful blow triggers an even greater, more massive explosion of energy within Mob, who now, with his overflowing, boundless power, effortlessly lifts the immense cultural tower without any visible strain. Mob can now truly release his incredible power at his own will. Toichiro responds by releasing a full 20% of his power, preparing to fight seriously and with full intent. Both of them begin to be consumed, overwhelmed by their own immense forces. However, the familiar voice of Ritsu causes Mob to regain his consciousness, just before he completely loses himself within his overwhelming power. Toichiro, absolutely determined to finish him off, unleashes a full 50% of his strength. But Mob, understanding the profound loneliness that truly consumes the leader, genuinely doesn't want to inflict real harm upon him. Even so, facing the relentless, constant attacks, Mob creates a massive, powerful energy sphere that impacts Toichiro directly. Everyone believes that the boss has finally been defeated, but Shu, with keen observation, notices that his power has fundamentally changed. A new, much more intense and overwhelming energy completely engulfs Mob. Already without any remaining strength to resist, he is struck by a series of blows of truly enormous, colossal power. Both of their bodies already clearly show the severe effects of so much intense wear and tear. Toichiro reaches a full 100% of his energy, completely transforming his body into a monstrous, grotesque form, possessing truly enormous, unimaginable strength. At this critical point, the combat devolves into a brutal, relentless exchange of powerful blows. Mob suddenly realizes that Toichiro's immense, accumulated power will soon violently explode, and so he urgently asks everyone to get away from the area as quickly as possible. In silence, Mob returned, stepping back in to contain the sheer force of the impending explosion. This selfless act made Toichiro vividly remember his wife, who had left him after a heated argument because he had blindly believed that power was absolutely everything. At that very moment, Mob was actively absorbing Toichiro's immense, raw energy deep within his own body. The subsequent release of this concentrated energy generated a massive, earth-shattering explosion that violently shook the entire surrounding area. However, Mob, against all odds, managed to survive the ordeal and woke up completely safe and sound. Everyone rushed to the scene to get him out of the wreckage. In the very middle of the city, a giant, colossal tree suddenly emerged. People widely believed that this enormous tree had been created by the young psychic with the distinctive mushroom-shaped hairstyle. Serizawa and Shu also bid farewell to Toichiro, who was subsequently arrested by direct government order. His son assured him, with heartfelt sincerity, that his mother had always been patiently waiting for him, ready to forgive him. Much later, back at Master Reigen's spiritual counseling office, Mob suddenly remembered that the peculiar hole in his shirt had actually been caused by a simple bag of broccoli seeds. This very bag of seeds, by absorbing the enormous, immense energy of the Claw Leader, had grown to reach that truly colossal, descommunal size. Serizawa also presented himself there, at the office, to inquire about a job as an assistant in Reigen's spiritual counseling office. Mob learns that Tsubomi is planning to enroll in Yusu Pepper High, a prestigious school where only the very best of the best students study. Immediately after, Mob encounters Tsubomi in his school's hallway, but she completely ignores him, already far too engrossed with her friends, chatting excitedly about high school. Furthermore, it turns out that in the interim, our protagonist, Mob, is tasked with submitting a completed form to his teacher, detailing what profession he wishes to pursue after graduation. However, Mob had genuinely never given any thought to that question and truly has absolutely no idea what he wants to be. Therefore, as he always does, Mob went to ask Reigen for some much-needed advice. Reigen in turn told him not to worry at all, because Mob already had a reserved, secure place waiting for him in Reigen's spirit consultation and various other services office. According to Reigen, that was Mob's true calling, his destined path. But the boy responded, stating clearly that he viewed that particular job only as a temporary employment, a stepping stone. So he then asked Reigen if, when he himself was a student, he had ever dreamed of becoming a spiritual consultant in the specialized field of psychics. Reigen immediately dodged the question, smoothly saying that when he was a teenager, he noticed his own unusual, unique abilities and decided to use them for the greater good, which is precisely why he chose the spiritual path. And of course, Mob completely fell for that elaborate story. Then Serizawa appeared, before whom Reigen wanted to truly show off his professional prowess. But when a client arrived with a supposedly cursed statuette worth 80,000 yen, Reigen, without noticing anything strange at all, simply touched it. Then both Mob and Serizawa immediately noticed a very strong, palpable cursed energy emanating from it. In a sudden panic, Reigen began to frantically improvise and decided to give the rookie, inexperienced Serizawa the opportunity to exorcise the spirit from the statuette, making it seem as if everything had been meticulously planned all along. Finally, Serizawa successfully eliminated the spirit without any problems whatsoever, but the expensive statuette unfortunately lost an arm. And then, the great and supposedly fearsome psychic Reigen used his secret, legendary technique of the Great Rice Explosion to reattach the arm back onto the statuette. After that whole ordeal, back at home, Mob told his parents all about the perplexing form. His father, in a reassuring tone, told him not to worry so much about it, reminding him that he still had a full 10 years ahead of him to decide on his future profession. His brother Ritsu suggested that for the time being, Mob should simply write down that he wanted to be an illusionist, since with his incredible power, he could easily become the true, legendary Houdini. And Dimple, in a much more sensible and practical manner, told him to just write anything at all, as it could always be changed later on. The very next day at school, Mob asked the athletes for their various opinions on different professions, and then he went up to the roof to reflect in front of the gigantic broccoli, where Misato approached him. She had long suspected that this enormous broccoli had appeared because of Mob, and she thought he was up there meditating on what he had sacrificed in the epic battle against the army of evil. She also told him that people now viewed that colossal broccoli tree as something truly divine, and that several different groups were actively worshipping it like a god. She reminded Mob once again about the community that worshipped him directly, but Mob wasn't interested in that at all for now. He simply wanted to decide on his future profession. Much later, after classes had ended, Reigen, Serizawa, and Mob went to work, visiting a super grumpy, perpetually complaining man who blamed absolutely everyone else for all of his misfortunes. Because of his overwhelming negativity and the constant smoke from his cigarettes, an enormous spirit of laziness had formed, which then began to put everyone around him to sleep. But in the end, Reigen finally realized what was happening, and our brave boys successfully exorcised it, although they did, unfortunately, destroy the roof of the guy's insured house in the process. But the most interesting thing of all is that Serizawa, looking at that grumpy man, saw a reflection of his past self, back when he lived confined within 4 walls. Mob, on the other hand, felt as if he was seeing his own future self, a potential outcome if he were to never decide on his profession. In the end, Mob wrote absolutely nothing on the form, so the teacher told him it wasn't serious at all, explaining that as long as Mob remained a teenager, he still had plenty of time to set a meaningful goal in his life. However, he did warn him not to postpone it for too long, as everything tends to become much more difficult later on in life. Right after that, a mysterious guy named Amakusa arrived in the city with the specific mission of finding the 4 great spirits who were planning to summon the Lord of Filth there. Meanwhile, back at school, Mob and 3 other students were specifically tasked with preparing the costumes for the upcoming haunted house event. While his 3 classmates simply wanted to get by using only bedsheets as their costumes, Mob, however, wanted to take the task seriously, even though he still had absolutely no ideas. Then, we see Reigen deep in thought, pondering how to significantly increase the visits to his office's website, while Serizawa informs him that he has decided to complete his compulsory education and, therefore, will be attending classes after work, starting at 4 o'clock. Reigen readily gives him his full approval. Just at that very moment, the aforementioned Amakusa arrives. He introduces himself as an evil spirit hunter and confidently claims that he has come to the city specifically to combat dark, malevolent forces. But upon hearing his strange and utterly confusing speech, Reigen decides to simply kick him out, stating he has no time for such nonsense, as he has clients waiting. However, after the clients finally leave, Amakusa returns once more. He states that he desperately needs help to break what he calls the circle of sadness. Reigen begins to despair, utterly frustrated because he understands absolutely nothing of what Amakusa is saying, but Amakusa explains that he cannot ask the police for help because they would arrest him for carrying weapons, so he came to them instead. Reigen replies to him, quite bluntly, that they do not engage in charity work, emphasizing that their organization is serious and operates strictly for money. Then, Amakusa begins to speak Reigen's language, so to speak. He pulls out a thick stack of cash and declares that he will indeed pay for their help, as his parents are wealthy and fully support his rather strange cause. Upon hearing this, Reigen immediately calls Mob, and they promptly set off on their mission. They locate the specified building, whose basement is completely covered in thick plant roots, and where they immediately begin to be attacked by malevolent spirits. In the middle of the intense combat, Amakusa unfortunately breaks his legendary 7,000 yen sword. Then Mob and Serizawa spring into decisive action, easily defeating the attacking spirits. There, they also encounter the 4 great spirits who had already successfully managed to summon the Lord of Filth. Mob still preoccupied with thinking about costume ideas, and Serizawa began to exorcise the spirits, taking turns in the process. Mob successfully defeated both the green spirit and the slug spirit. Serizawa, with impressive skill, cut another spirit into pieces using his unique business card fan. Then, the Lord of Filth activated and began to release his immense power. But in a mere matter of seconds, the entire group completely destroyed him. Impressed by the incredible display he witnessed, Amakusa offered both Serizawa and Mob an excellent, generous salary if they would work for him. But when Reigen intervened, Amakusa immediately understood his error and sincerely apologized for the proposal, because Reigen, unlike so many others, had agreed to help him selflessly, and that was something Amakusa deeply, truly valued. Mob, after this entire eye-opening experience, finally understood precisely what kind of costumes they should create for the haunted house. He eagerly shared his newfound ideas with his classmates, and together, they collaboratively created costumes that exactly, perfectly imitated the very spirits they had just fought. Reigen, for his part, seized the opportune moment to upload images of the Lord of Filth to his website, with the clear intention of attracting even more clients. Then, a situation unfolded where Mob saved Tsubomi from a potentially cloying, overwhelming fame that her overly enthusiastic friends might have generated for her. After that, they both took out the trash together, side by side. Tsubomi thanked him sincerely, and then each went their separate ways, as if absolutely nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Much later, after classes, Masato approached Mob and told him about an important meeting of the Psycho Helmet cult, which was scheduled for Sunday, and asked him to at least drop by for a little while. Right after that, Tome appeared, reminding Mob that he had previously promised to go with her on Sunday to search for new psychics for her club. Thus, Mob suddenly found himself with 2 conflicting commitments for the very same day. Then, Emi also approached him, and she noticed that lately Mob seemed to be constantly surrounded by girls. At that very moment, Mob suddenly realized that he was genuinely attracting a significant amount of female attention, much like a true Giga Chad. He excitedly told this to Ritsu, who was simply happy and pleased for his brother. Meanwhile, the giant broccoli continued to attract more and more diverse groups of people. As a direct result of all this, Masato urgently called Mob to inform him that on Sunday, at the Psycho Helmet cult meeting, they were going to choose the new psychic guru, thereby eliminating all of the false leaders. Therefore, Mob absolutely had to be there, no matter what the cost. If he didn't become the guru, someone else would inevitably take control of the massive group, which already boasted over 500,000 members. Masato also told him that if he were to become the guru, many more girls, including even Tsubomi, would definitely take notice of him. At that very moment, Mob recognized his newfound Giga Chadness, and both of them agreed that he would indeed attend the meeting, although Masato, unfortunately, forgot to tell him the exact address. Then Dimple suddenly appeared. Mob told him everything that had happened, but Dimple, who had been absent for quite some time, replied with total, unwavering certainty that girls didn't truly, genuinely want him. That made Mob quite suspicious, as Dimple hadn't even been present, yet he spoke with far too much certainty. Mob didn't take his words well at all, as he felt he was currently at the absolute peak of female attention. Dimple then reminded him that he had returned specifically to take Mob to the Psycho Helmet cult meeting, and together they would reach the very top of the club before anyone else. But Mob, feeling somewhat conceited and puffed up by his recent experiences, replied that even if he were to take the throne of that club, he would do it entirely without Dimple, since Dimple had absolutely nothing to do with the group, although in reality, thanks to Dimple's brainwashing and Mob's immense power, that psychic club had originally been born. Now, however, the people didn't want to see Dimple at all, but rather Mob. The only problem was that Mob still hadn't quite decided if he wanted to do it or not. Dimple told him that if they joined forces, they would not only become powerful gurus, but they could also create an entire, complete religion, and that he would finally fulfill his long-held dream of becoming a god. But Mob did not accept the proposal at all. He firmly stated that he was not interested in either power or fame, and that furthermore, he had realized that Dimple was actively absorbing the energy from the giant broccoli, which made him exactly like all those others who sought to seize the coveted title of guru. Mob asked Dimple to please stop weaving his intrigues, which utterly enraged the latter, who then flew away in a huff. Then, already at work, Mob told Reigen that more and more girls were approaching him, and he also told him that he had decided to go to the Psycho Helmet cult meeting to become their new guru. Reigen immediately realized that the boy was getting a little bit conceited, perhaps a bit too full of himself. However, when he saw the sheer number of club members and mentally translated that into potential money, since donations were being received, he told him that Mob definitely, absolutely should become the guru and of course tell everyone about his great, magnificent master, Reigen. But before all of that, Mob needed to dress appropriately for the occasion. So Reigen gave him a 5,000 yen bonus, although Mob had absolutely no idea what to buy with it. Then, on the street, he coincidentally ran into Teru, who commented that he noticed as if the entire city was being slowly invaded by plant roots. Teru also helped him choose a t-shirt with a truly ridiculous print, which clearly demonstrated that Mob had absolutely no sense of style, although no one actually told him that. Before the meeting, Mob wanted to meet Tome to look for psychics, but she wasn't answering her phone, just like Masato. Their phones were completely turned off. Since Mob didn't know the location of the meeting, he was unable to attend. Meanwhile, at the meeting itself, a false guru appeared, strikingly resembling Mob. He called himself the spokesman of the tree, and boldly proclaimed himself to be the true Psycho Helmet. He declared that he wanted to change the world for the better and lead his people towards true happiness. He even went so far as to compare himself to the sacred tree, which initially caused some rejection among many attendees. But after he showed them a real, undeniable miracle, everyone eventually ended up recognizing him as the legitimate guru. The very next day, Mob met with Masato and Tome, and he asked them why they hadn't gone to the meeting or responded to his calls. Both of them said that for some inexplicable reason, the entire event was completely erased from their memory, and they had no idea how it had happened. Mob asked if they believed it had something to do with the Psycho Helmet cult meeting, and Tome admitted that yes, she had indeed been invited and found it to be incredibly interesting. That's why Tome decided to change the name of the Psychics Club to the school branch of the Psycho Helmet cult doctrine. Furthermore, she announced that everyone would now dedicate a full 5 minutes each day to venerating said doctrine, which left absolutely everyone completely shocked and speechless. Then, Reigen called Mob and showed him the recording of the previous day's meeting, which already had garnered over 2,000 views. He pointed out the imposter guru and explained to Mob that after that particular event, absolutely everyone present at the meeting joined the Psycho Helmet cult club, which was, to say the least, somewhat unsettling. After that, they moved on to discuss their work matters. Reigen commented that lately they had been receiving many requests related to roots growing in various buildings, which seemed to have a direct, undeniable relation to the giant broccoli. The problem was that lately, people only came to the agency for cases related to those specific roots, but Reigen earned very little from that. So he asked Mob if he could help him get rid of the giant broccoli, and Mob immediately accepted. Thus, both of them departed for the location. Meanwhile, in the bustling streets of the city, members of the Psycho Helmet cult club were actively distributing sweets containing small pieces of the sacred broccoli. One of those fragments reached Teruki, and upon eating it, he immediately felt as if he was completely under hypnosis. He described it as an incredibly potent psychotropic substance that profoundly distorted reality. Noticing that this substance was being distributed absolutely everywhere, he quickly deduced that its origin must be the giant broccoli itself, so he rapidly headed there and entered it. There, he was received by the false Psycho Helmet. Teruki told him directly that he had noticed he was clearly imitating Mob. They immediately started fighting, and although Teruki cut him several times, the imposter only grew larger and more powerful. And when the imposter called him by his name, Teruki finally understood the truth. That false guru was, in fact, Dimple, who had used the immense power of the tree to create a physical body and become, as he had always dreamed, a god within the club. Immediately after, he decisively defeated Teruki. Afterward, the tree's roots began to absorb the life force from surrounding plants, and anyone who touched them fell into a deep hypnosis, something Mine Gishi experienced firsthand. Mob and Reigen, on their way to the giant broccoli, also noticed that the entire city had changed quite drastically. According to their initial plan, Mob was supposed to use his immense power to lift the broccoli and carry it all the way to the sea, while Reigen cleared the path ahead. However, upon seeing the sheer magnitude and scale of the problem, Mob decided to call Ritsu for help. They convinced him to join them by using a clever metaphor about Ritsu agreed to help them, and how even noticed that almost the entire student council was behaving quite strangely and actively worshipping the tree. But then, he suddenly got a headache and decided to eat one of the sweets that had been distributed at school earlier. He also offered the sweets to the others, although only he actually ate one. The others preferred to save theirs. Right after that, Ritsu's attitude completely changed, and he said they should go to a certain place. It turned out that he had led them directly to a Psycho Helmet cult meeting, where everyone was eating the very same broccoli sweets. Seeing their faces, the club members immediately realized that Mob and his companions wanted to destroy the tree. Reigen and Mob understood that they were being surrounded and quickly began to flee. But even an old man sitting casually on the street was already completely under the tree's hypnotic effect. Eventually, even Reigen succumbed to the broccoli's control, so Mob left him behind and proceeded alone towards the tree. There, a cheering crowd awaited him, recognizing him as the true Psycho Helmet. They were absolutely euphoric to now have two gurus. Mob entered the tree, and immediately the imposter began to speak to him. He revealed that the entire street ovation had been orchestrated by him, but Mob didn't approve, as ever since the fake guru appeared, the club members had changed quite a lot. Dimple explained to him that the sacred broccoli was no longer the same, for it had absorbed the energy of the people who adored it. Mob found Teruki chained up and promptly freed him. It was then that he fully understood the imposter guru was Dimple all along. Dimple proposed that Mob join him to live a life of absolute luxury, but Mob became enraged and demanded he release everyone from their hypnosis. Dimple then explained that his magic worked through pieces of the broccoli, or by physical contact, and he clarified that in reality, he wasn't controlling people's minds. He had merely added a little bit of faith to their worlds, genuinely believing that this would bring them happiness. His grand plan was to continue expanding his self-created religion throughout the entire world, and thus truly become a god. But Mob responded that Dimple simply didn't understand the gravity of what he had done, that he had utterly destroyed the entire city. Mob called him a complete fraud, one who subjected people to his will by sheer force. At that very moment, Teruki intervened, who was already under the broccoli's powerful control. He told Mob that if he didn't agree with Dimple, then he was turning against his own family and friends. Mob responded that he wanted Dimple to show his true face, but immediately after, Teru grabbed him, launched him high into the air, and then slammed him down against the ground, crashing through the bottom of the tree, where the roots began to firmly hold him and absorb his vital energy. Mob broke free and fully understood that Dimple wasn't appearing because he was genuinely afraid of him. So Mob began to utterly destroy all of Dimple's clones. With tears welling in his eyes, he warned that if Dimple didn't come out right now, he would erase him completely. Finally, Dimple appeared and told Mob that Tsubomi wasn't one of his garden members, that it had taken a great deal of effort for her to even join the club, that she never paid him any attention before because he didn't fit in with the others, but if Mob were to become a guru, everything would certainly change. Mob said absolutely nothing. He simply grabbed him and slammed him violently against the ground. Then, Dimple unleashed his full power and appeared before Mob as a magnificent golden god. He began to strike him with what he called his divine blows, mockingly taunting that Mob was nothing more than a mere punching bag, but Mob's emotion meter was already nearing a full 100%, and his power continued to surge and increase. With a truly furious glare, Mob demanded to know Dimple's true intentions. Dimple confessed that from the very first day he had met him, his entire plan had been to use Mob for his own selfish ends. Mob then told him, quite plainly, that he would erase him completely. Dimple launched one final powerful attack with all his remaining strength, which utterly destroyed Mob's school uniform, revealing that truly horrible t-shirt he was wearing underneath. Dimple told him directly the t-shirt was absolutely hideous, and just as Mob was about to explode, his emotion meter reached its absolute limit and he experienced a sudden flashback. He remembered everyone who had seen his t-shirt and that the only one who had ever told him the honest truth was Dimple. So instead of unleashing his immense power against him, Mob released it all up into the sky. He had finally understood that what was truly ruining his conversation with Dimple was precisely that very power. Now, without any powers, they could finally speak to each other as true friends. Mob said that he genuinely trusted Dimple because he was the only one who had given him an honest, sincere answer about his clothing. He apologized for having become so arrogant and for not having understood that the only thing Dimple truly wanted was Mob's help to fulfill his ultimate dream of becoming a god. Because in actual fact, when Dimple finally achieved his grand goal, the very first thing he did was go looking for Mob, when he could have perfectly well accomplished everything entirely on his own. And so it became known that Dimple simply wished for someone, anyone, to truly notice him. When he first met Mob, Mob became his one true friend. Mob told him that he was now completely willing to listen to him as a friend. Dimple then broke down into tears and ceased controlling the tree. Mob, utterly exhausted from having released all of his immense energy, lost consciousness, and Dimple gently picked him up in his arms and carried him towards the exit. But immediately after, it was revealed that the tree, now free from Dimple's control, had acquired a consciousness of its very own, and it began to attack them, intending to devour Mob's body as sustenance. Dimple bravely fought against it while desperately trying to awaken Mob, but ultimately he decided to leave Mob deep within the tree, under its protection, and went out to fight with all his remaining strength. The battle was absolutely brutal, and Dimple ended up gravely wounded. In his very last act, he used what little power he had left to alter Mob's perception, appearing before him in his normal form and earnestly asking him to leave that place. He said that he would stay a little while longer to rest and that he still had one more place he needed to see. In reality, while Mob was making his way towards the exit, Dimple bravely continued his fierce struggle against the tree. The tree ultimately ended up absorbing him, but Dimple managed to destroy it from the inside out. The gigantic broccoli began to slowly disintegrate. Shortly after, Mob emerged, and under one final hypnotic command from Dimple, he told everyone present that they absolutely had to leave that place. 1 month later, our story takes us to the Telepathy Club. Tome, fully aware that upon graduating along with Kijibayashi, the club would inevitably dissolve, as only Inukawa and Saruta would remain, presented the problem to them. But they, ever so relaxed as usual, simply said that it was no big deal, that at least they would have the cherished memories of having done absolutely nothing and having eaten whatever they pleased. This brought Tom to tears, as after such a long time, they had made absolutely no progress whatsoever in their earnest search for telepathy, and now she desperately wished to at least try one very last time. She lamented, thinking she wouldn't find other people who would support her strange, unusual goal, but she soon discovered that the others had, in reality, never truly cared about her objective at all. Upon finally understanding this, Tom officially announced the club's dissolution. After that, we see Mob at his house speaking with Ritsu, who informs him that some kids are waiting for him outside. While they're at it, they briefly converse about Dimple, of whom they haven't had any news for an entire month. Once outside, Mob meets with the club members, who earnestly beg him to help them find other telepaths so they can bring Tome back. Then Ritsu appears and proposes they search for the telepathic Shiratori brothers, Kaito and Daiichi. They discover that their telepathy only functions between themselves, but if Mob were to amplify their signal, they could potentially make it reach even more people throughout the city. If anyone manages to hear it, that will be the very person they were searching for. They begin to diligently work on this, and, quite surprisingly, Takanaka appears, an old former member of the club whose departure almost caused its complete closure. Apparently, he's now in the tennis club, and he pretended that he was only coming over to warm up a little bit. However, it turns out that he can actually hear the brother's signal. He is a powerful telepath who possesses the ability to both read and transmit thoughts. He confesses that ever since he was just 5 years old, he has lived with this extraordinary ability, but every single time he used it, things ended badly, so now he wears earplugs to avoid hearing other people's thoughts. He has already suffered quite enough because of his powers and absolutely doesn't want to get involved with anyone else. Then, Mob intervenes. He understands that Takanaka had originally joined the club seeking out people who shared his unique problems, but upon seeing that they were just a group of lazy slackers, he simply left. Mob explains to him that even though he desperately wishes to ignore it, his power is an intrinsic part of who he is, and he simply cannot escape from that reality. Finally, Takanaka agreed to help ability the boys, truly so they went to find Reigen and can also be drive them to genuinely help other precisely people on New Year's Day, because every 7 years a UFO appears there, and it turns out that had always been Tome's lifelong dream, to see one with her very own eyes. Even though she wasn't answering their calls, they managed to get in touch with her, and she enthusiastically joined the group. Takanaka also joined them, although he arrived a full hour late, and Tome didn't truly believe he was a telepath. However, what worried them the most was the possibility that Reigen, due to the delay, might have already left. But no, he too had actually overslept and arrived just in the nick of time, running frantically to catch up with the group. They set off towards the mountain, but first they got completely lost on the way, and then they had to abandon the car and continue their journey on foot. During the arduous journey, Tome began to complain quite a bit, thinking that the entire thing was just a cruel, elaborate prank, but Mob activated his mature mode and explained everything to her with utmost clarity, which effectively calmed the situation, and they continued their ascent. They then discovered that they needed to read a specific spell, but Inukawa had carelessly left the book back in the car. To everyone's utter surprise, Takanaka had actually spent the entire night studying the spell, and thanks to his diligent efforts, they were able to recite it. They formed a figure 8 shape with stones and began to read the spell aloud. However, absolutely nothing happened, as the spell had originated from a book written by a guy who was later arrested for fraud. But immediately after, when the precise moment arrived, a brilliant, dazzling light appeared, from which 3 adorable little aliens emerged. Immediately, they extended their hands to Tom, who was able to communicate with them through Takanaka, although she couldn't think of anything at all to say to them. Then, the friendly aliens decided to take them aboard their ship, where everyone celebrated the new year with immense enthusiasm and joy. As a heartfelt symbol of their newfound friendship, the extraterrestrials presented them with a special gift, and the kids in turn also gave them various items: a warm scarf, a notebook, a watch, some chewing gum, and a video game console. Mob gifted them a bit of his telekinesis, and Reigen quite generously gave them his pajamas. In the end, everyone eventually returned to Earth, except for Inukawa. The friendly aliens took him with them to their home planet, where he began to truly experience what it was like to live as one of their own. It turned out that they were an entirely peaceful species. They didn't even know what a weapon was. Even so, Inukawa managed to bravely defeat some local thieving monsters. Over time, he made them fully understand that he genuinely wanted to return home, and so they brought him back to Earth. Afterwards, we see a dream of Mob's, where he vividly remembers showing his power to Tsubomi, and then, back at school, he learns that she will be moving away the very next month. So Mob decides he must confess his feelings, and he starts asking his acquaintances for advice. The athletic guys motivate him both physically and mentally. Through Takanaka, he wanted to know what Tsubomi thought of him, but Takanaka refused to use his powers for such a thing. Tome advised him to change his hairstyle. While Mob went from friend to friend, all the boys in school paraded one after another to confess to Tsubomi, and she gently rejected every single one of them. Masato informed Mob about this wave of confessions and warned him not to approach her just yet, because Tsubomi was breaking hearts left and right, non-stop. It was better to wait. She also asked him what he found so appealing about Tsubomi, and, to his surprise, Mob didn't know how to respond. Afterwards, he went to see Reigen, who told him that he should be guided by his true feelings, and that if what he felt was genuine, then he absolutely had to act on it. Mob, meanwhile, kept reflecting on why he liked Tsubomi so very much. That girl who, as a child, had told him she was already fed up with his powers, which is why, ever since that day, he had avoided using his abilities in front of her. In the end, he couldn't fully understand why he loved her so deeply. Reigen advised him that above all else, he should show Tsubomi his true self. He told him that Mob was a simple, honest person, and that by simply being himself, he could win her heart without any tricks or lies whatsoever. Unlike himself, Reigen confessed that if he showed his true self, they'd send him straight to hell, but Mob was different. Afterwards, Mob met up with Teru and told him everything that was going on. Teru recommended that he bring flowers to his date. The most important thing, he told him, was to believe in himself, and everything would turn out just fine. Mob also confessed his feelings to Ritsu, who became very worried about his brother losing control, especially if Tsubomi were to reject him. Then Mob, with a trembling voice but utterly determined, called Tsubomi, and like a true man, he arranged a date with her at the park. As he made his way to their meeting point, he noticed with some surprise that he was feeling surprisingly calm. On the way, he bought a small bouquet of flowers, but Minagishi, being kind-hearted, replaced it with a truly magnificent one. Then, Mob, while crossing a street, saved a cat that was about to be run over by a car. However, immediately after that, a breaking point occurred. Mob was hit by a car while protecting a boy who recklessly crossed in front of it. As a result of this incident, the unleashed psychic Mob was born, so incredibly powerful that the government issued an evacuation order for the entire area. Every single one of his steps caused tremors as if they were actual earthquakes. With the bouquet still firmly in hand, he walked, destroying everything in his path towards the park, where Tsubomi was patiently waiting for him. Teru witnessed this terrifying transformation and decided to intervene, as they had been longtime rivals. He managed to save several people from Mob's destructive path, but just like in their very first confrontation, Mob, completely out of control, easily defeated him. Kuyama and Sakurai, former members of the Claw organization, also crossed Mob's path as they wanted to protect their shop from the destruction. While all of this was happening, someone took a photo of Mob, which quickly went viral across the internet. Upon seeing it, Reigen and Serizawa immediately understood that it wasn't a natural disaster at all, but Mob completely out of control, and they rushed towards him. Ritsu also sensed his brother's immense power and immediately set out to find him. At a crossroads, he found Mob's blood-stained backpack, and he instantly understood that Mob had completely lost control. He remembered that something quite similar had already happened back in their childhood. Mob always used to express his emotions freely, but ever since that other part of him emerged, he began to repress them, becoming much more closed off and withdrawn. Then, we were shown the American, Joseph, who was flying towards the city along with a group of dangerous criminals. The plan was for these individuals to stop Mob in exchange for their freedom. Among the prisoners, there was Toichiro Suzuki, Mob's old enemy, who easily defeated all the others and declared that he himself would defeat Mob, as he had a very personal score to settle with him. Toichiro appeared just as Mob had already defeated Kuyama and Sakurai. He attacked Mob at full speed, but Mob didn't even flinch. Mob counterattacked, and not only did he knock out the two former Claw members, but he also seriously injured Toichiro in the process. He was about to finish him off when his son suddenly appeared and rescued him. Toichiro explained that he had been deliberately taking the hits on purpose to accumulate energy, and, together with his son, they launched their legendary combined power bomb against Mob. But it didn't work at all. Mob absorbed all of the energy without any effort whatsoever. Then, Toichiro remembered that some time ago, Mob had actually saved him by absorbing his energy, and now he intended to return the favor by doing the very same thing. He was completely willing to sacrifice himself. However, after remembering everything and saying a few heartfelt words, he confessed that he wasn't nearly as strong as Mob, and that he simply wasn't capable of doing it. Faced with this realization, they began to retreat, hoping that Joseph would pick them up. They also realized that most likely there was no one left who was capable of stopping Mob. Afterwards, the sports club guys arrived wanting to save their teammate, but Mob simply threw them away with just a single movement. Only Sagawa managed to get close, and Mob slammed him against a bridge. If it weren't for Ritsu's timely appearance, another athlete would have been eliminated for good. Ritsu told his brother that he used to fear Mob would stop being his brother and become something entirely different, but now he understood that his power was an integral part of who he truly was. He promised him that he would never abandon him and that he could absolutely trust him. Then, Ritsu also unleashed the entirety of his own strength. Meanwhile, deep inside himself, Mob was desperately fighting to regain control of his body. Ritsu thought that perhaps a strong emotional impact might be able to help him, so upon seeing the bouquet of flowers, he tried to destroy it, but the unleashed Mob protected the bouquet at all costs. Then, he threw Ritsu several meters away, and Ritsu finally understood that he wouldn't be able to stop him. By that point, a gigantic whirlwind had already formed all around Mob, and all of Japan was utterly shocked by the strange phenomena that were striking that small town. Inside the whirlwind, Mob began to speak with his uncontrolled power, which also called itself Mob, because they were both one and the same entity. Mob tried to reject it, but the force responded that if anyone had to disappear, it was him, not the force itself. That immense force could no longer be stopped by anyone at all. Mob asked why it was doing all of this, and the force replied that its sole goal was to meet Tsubomi. It turned out that Mob never truly understood why he loved her, and that was because in reality, the one who loved her was his very own power. From that moment when Mob stopped using his powers in front of her, the force felt a strong attraction to Tsubomi because it believed that she liked Mob not just for who he was as a person, but also for his incredible power. Now, Mob, completely unleashed, wanted to present himself to Tsubomi exactly as he was. Mob began to disintegrate, his fragments floating towards the force, and once Mob disappeared entirely, no one else would ever try to suppress it again. Meanwhile, Tsubomi, despite having seen the massive tornado in the distance, decided to stay in the park, patiently waiting for him, completely unaware that that very same whirlwind was actually Mob himself. At that precise moment, Reigen and Serizawa appeared near the tornado. Mob, even from a considerable distance, began to absorb Serizawa's energy, and, in the end, only Reigen dared to enter the very core of the whirlwind. By that specific moment, almost all of Mob's individual parts had already merged with his overwhelming force. Upon seeing Reigen, Mob reacted, but his force told him that throughout all that time, Mob had only believed Reigen's deceptive lies, that Reigen had merely used him to exercise spirits by taking advantage of his immense power, and with those very words, the last remaining fragments of Mob also merged completely with the force. Meanwhile, Reigen was struck by a rock and the fierce wind was throwing him around everywhere, but as if he were an immortal con artist, he managed to reach the unleashed Mob. Somehow, he managed to grab him by the hand, and to everyone's utter surprise, he actually managed to stop him. It turned out that inside Reigen was Dimple, who had survived and returned to this world thanks to Mob having kept him alive deep within himself. Dimple then asked Mob to listen to Reigen, and Mob surprisingly agreed to do so. Then Reigen asked Dimple to exit his body and began to speak to Mob with complete sincerity. He confessed that he never possessed any spiritual or extrasensory powers whatsoever, that everything had been a lie right from the very beginning. Upon hearing this shocking revelation, the uncontrolled Mob finally stopped. Reigen continued by saying that ever since their very first meeting, he had been using Mob, taking full advantage of his incredible power, and he sincerely asked for his forgiveness for that. He also apologized for pretending to be a wise and knowledgeable mentor when, in actual fact, he knew absolutely nothing at all. He told Mob that he wasn't the only special one, that everyone has two distinct faces within themselves, and he admitted that he deeply hated his own lying side, the one he always tried so hard to conceal. All of this he said so that Mob could finally come to terms with and accept who he truly was. Then, deep within himself, Mob spoke once again with his inner force. This time, Mob asked it to accept him exactly as he was, in the very same way that others had once accepted him. The force expressed fear that Tsubomi might reject him, but Mob told it that as long as they were together, there was absolutely nothing to be afraid of, and he proposed that they go together to see her as one unified being. And so they headed towards her, with the bouquet still firmly in hand as a complete and whole Mob. But just a few minutes later, Mob returned with the very same expression on his face as always. Tsubomi had indeed rejected him, telling him that she had never once seen him as a potential boyfriend. Mob couldn't hold back his tears any longer. Reigen put an arm around his shoulder and told him that now it was time to rebuild the city. For that, they would probably need the assistance of all the known psychics. Afterwards, there was a time skip of half a year. Mob had become the vice captain of the Body Improvement Club and was now dedicated to motivating the new recruits. What's more, he stopped using his powers for trivial matters. Later on, he ran into Teru, and together they headed to Reigen's office, where Serizawa was already working with complete ease, and Tome also had a temporary job there. It was there that we learned Mob had finally managed to connect with Tsubomi, as they were now frequently talking on the phone. Then, a whole bunch of psychics arrived, along with Shou, all gathered together to surprise Reigen because it was his birthday. The surprise moved him so deeply that he almost burst into tears until Tom playfully smashed his face into the cake. And so, this truly wonderful series comes to its conclusion. It's not merely a story about psychic powers and spectacular battles, but rather a profound reflection on personal growth, identity, and the immense importance of human connections. Through Mob's remarkable evolution, we witness how someone seemingly ordinary can truly transform themselves without ever losing sight of who they fundamentally are. Mob ultimately reminds us that true power lies in embracing our authentic selves and in the kindness with which we treat everyone around us. Thank you for choosing me to watch your summaries.